Hello, and welcome to the Charlotte Show. You'll notice that I didn't proclaim we're live. I'm still working on pointing that out because it sort of negates not doing it by pointing out that I haven't done it. But hello, welcome to the Charlotte Show. True Faith presents the Charlotte Show. I'm Charlotte. I'm joined today by Alex Hurst and theoretically Norman Riley. In theory, he has not yet arrived, which is why it's in theory, but I'm sure he'll truck along when he's ready. There is potential confusion because tonight we are starting a little bit earlier than normal. We are doing a 6:30 p.m. show instead of a 7 p.m. show because tonight is a premiere and sort of Q&A event, I think, for the new fan film We Are the Geordies, which Alex and I are both going to be virtually attending. Nobody can do anything fun anymore. And in person. And so we decided to start a little bit earlier so that people who are attending that can, and so that we can, primarily. Alex, how are you? Thank you for joining me.
I'm really well. I'm really looking forward to a real life game of association football tomorrow, where our team is capable of selecting players not struck down by the plague. And I'm excited, and I'm pleased to be here with you, Charlotte, on your lovely show.
Well, thanks. It's good to have you. Norman has just texted saying we're starting at 7, right? So he'll be along eventually. We can manage. Cool. Yes, I'm looking forward to it too. That is, of course, a reference to the fact that we were postponed the Villa game last week, and we are now going ahead with the West Brom game after our players have been in training this week, or some of them have been in training this week. We know Callum Wilson has because he put it on his Instagram. And yeah, I'm interested too. I'm in the London Magpie group, WhatsApp group, and we're talking about how we're looking forward to seeing what first team players we can scrape together, and then maybe what youth team players are on the bench, because I think Steve Bruce in his press conference today was saying that he's more expecting a decent first team, but not much bench options. Is that what you're expecting, Alex?
I'm half expecting that. I really would have a lot of respect for Steve Bruce if we turned out the same team as Crystal Palace tomorrow and it was all a giant mind game. And West Brom got to the ground and saw the team sheet and were just blown away by it. I have a lot of time for that. Premier League and Aston Villa would probably have some questions, but worry about that next week, aren't
we? So you're saying that the idea that there was no COVID, just all together,
just the whole thing has been a hoax. Joe Linton, Callum Wilson, all the lads, Shelby rock up. Steve Bruce delays the team sheet tomorrow. The Premier League are furious, and then the same 16 or whatever, or how many subs came on the bench? 7. So it's 18. The same 18 rock up. It probably won't be like that, but I don't have a lot of respect for the job Steve Bruce has done so far, but he would go up a notch in my world. And to be fair, that would also excuse the club's disgraceful lack of information on it. So everyone wins.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that. The lack of communication information as well, but I'll hang fire on it for now, because do you think that there would not be some kind of penalty from the Premier League if in fact we'd lied about it?
Well, first of all, prove it. We can add it to one of the many court cases. A judge will get this case file, just one of those comedy files that big, just loads of sheets of paper. It's probably digital these days, but ignore that. And it's just various court cases. Premier League against us against them. Some fans are also getting involved. Just court cases all around. The lawyers will do very well out of it, as they always do.
Yes, thank goodness someone will. Davey says, of all the clubs to have an outbreak, you could have put your house on it being there.
Very good article on True Faith this week by Michael Martin.
Mm-hmm.
About that.
Yeah, about going viral, Newcastle United. Yes, so I also did want to talk to you about the communication or lack of. Obviously, there is patient confidentiality and, you know, people's medical information is not, it's not our right to know individuals' medical information.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's what we're asking for.
We're going to know. We're going to know. We're going to know tomorrow. It's like if Carl Darlow's not playing, it's not like it's going to be wonder why Darlow's out. Hamstring injury trains like, no, he's got freaking COVID, man.
Maybe they'll like wheel him out and put him on the bench anyway. Just to like, look, he's fine.
We'll put a new substitutes bench for the goalkeepers in level 7 today, just so they can enjoy the game. No other reason.
Yeah. Well, you can still be ill and not be contagious, so maybe it's that. He has Davey has also pointed out it's ready-made excuses for Bruce, because he has in fact already teed up a few of these excuses, because he said today in the press conference that a couple had it quite badly, which I want to be clear, that is awful. Like, that anybody is getting sick and is unwell, that's the concern here. Like, it is ridiculous, and there's so many other layers of concern. But if people are getting sick and you know, they're exposing their families to a potentially quite deadly virus, depending on, you know, your age and other factors, that's really bad. And I really hope that everybody who has had it or been exposed to it is now okay. Like, I just want to caveat that. I've written a special for tomorrow, and I think I've tried to get that message across. But yes, I've lost my train of thought now. But yeah, go ahead.
Getting your finger in the screen.
Little finger up there.
Davey's right, and Bruce is a classic. It's not an excuse, but Pardew used to do the same in the post-match press conference, talking about injuries, talking about the ref. I don't want to talk about the referee today, and then spend 90 seconds talking about the referee. If we lose tomorrow, Bruce will go, listen, it's not an excuse, but we haven't trained for 2 weeks. We've got loads of players out, and on another day, I think we could have done quite well. So I agree with you, Davey. It's a ready-made non-excuse for him, because remember, it's not an excuse, but.
Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. It was that he's already teeing them up, because he has said in these press conferences, we have had these players who have been ill, and some have been quite ill, and there are still some with quite a lot of fatigue. So whilst I'm sure that's true, it's very convenient, isn't it, for when we absolutely lose it against West Brom tomorrow. Greg says maybe Bruce has invented a new vaccine. Do you think that's possible?
Anything is possible. You know, we haven't heard from him in a couple of weeks. What happens, right? Look what happens. Newcastle United don't play against Aston Villa, and at the same time, a vaccine is approved by the MHRCA, whatever they're called. They're not definitely called that, but you know, is it a coincidence? Yes. Has he invented the vaccine? Probably not. Though, to be fair to Bruce, I'd be content with him just setting the team up efficiently in a tactically like productive way to win games. He doesn't have to win our respect by discovering vaccines. Who's he tested on? That's what I want to know. Is this whole outbreak testing vaccinations that are unauthorized? Who knows? The silence is deafening.
Wow, we're getting fully into conspiracy theory territory here. You need a much weirder background. You need to like hang a sheet behind you, Alex, if you're going to be telling me that this last 2 weeks have actually been about Steve Bruce testing unauthorized vaccines on first team players. You think he'd start with the under 21s?
Yeah, well, that might explain their dreadful performances for the last 18 months. They won a game in about 6 years, the under 23s.
Well, yeah, it's the vaccine's fault. So the communication has been absolutely dreadful around this. Paul White, who I was chatting to in the WhatsApp group earlier, wanted to know if we thought if Steve Bruce, in fact, I'll find that it made me laugh that let me have a look. We were talking about Steve Bruce, and he said, oh, actually, it was Greg. Greg, I'm so sorry. I've attributed what made me laugh to Paul, but it was in fact you. It was Steve Bruce's inability, wants us to cover Steve Bruce's inability to know if something has happened to one or more person. Oh, Norman will like this, and he's here, so hang on. Norman, we're live. Hi, thank you so much. I'm so sorry for the bad communication. That's all on me. But we are here. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, glad to join. A little bit late.
Do you want to fill Norman in on what he's missed?
We're basically, you know how CNN, our news show, gets weird?
Yes, very.
Well, Alex went down the vein of CNN just now with the idea that, firstly, that this has all been a ruse, that we never had a COVID outbreak and it's just a fun con that Steve Bruce is playing, and he's going to put out a super strong team tomorrow.
He's going to put out the same team tomorrow that started at Palace, and Slaven Bilic is just going to walk out of the stadium.
And then, secondly, because Greg said, oh, that's nice. Greg said maybe Bruce has invented a new vaccine. Alex's contention is now that this outbreak has been because Steve Bruce has been trying out unauthorized vaccines on the first team squad. So it's a little bit less weird and a lot more conspiracy theory that we're getting into. But yes, exactly. Listen, Davey says, hello, Norman, only 11 minutes late. That is on me because I did not communicate the time, and it is normally 7 p.m.
Yeah,
so
no blame for anything, ever.
I'm very grateful to you for being able to jump on earlier. So thank you. Yes, no, Greg said he wants us to discuss Steve Bruce's inability to know if something has happened to one or more person. So he says often we've got 1 or 2 injuries, and he said 3 or 4 have COVID. Well, which one is it? The one?
Not massive numbers, are they?
No,
it's not like you're dealing with 57,000 people. You're like, I think about 23,220 have got it, and then maybe the others haven't. It's not like that, is it? It's like 5 people.
Yeah. It just made me laugh so much because I'd never clocked that, but of course he does it all the time. He's like 1 or 2 with knocks, got 3 or 4 out. Well, you're in charge. You should know the exact numbers.
It's not pints, is it? It's not pints. It's not like, oh, I went out last night and had 1 or 2 pints. It's not like that kind of thing, is it? It's like COVID and injuries at a football club. I think I had like 6 or 7 pints last night. It's not that, Steve. It's like, this is human beings.
Maybe the problem is he's having 6 or 7 pints.
I mean, there's that possibility. There's always that possibility.
I think it's so funny. Like it further, and it must do it like subconsciously, but it further undermines him because he's unable to give like definitive answers to anything. So yes, we don't know who still has it or who will be out tomorrow, but we know that a couple still do. So as Alex pointed out earlier, when they're not allowed, and the communication's been shocking around who has it and who doesn't, and they can't give that medical information out. You know, there are laws on that, but Alex was pointed out that we'll know tomorrow because we'll know who's playing and who's not even on the bench. So we'll be able to make a reasonably educated guess. Paul White did point out in the group that I'm in that I said, did anybody want us to discuss anything? And he said, Steve Bruce said it's ridiculous how fast COVID has spread in the club, completely failing to understand how a virus works and making him chief suspect super spreader. So
also, it's been here since March. If you just switch on the TV, there's an indication on telly that it spreads pretty quickly, right?
They've locked us down. They've had us locked down since like the end of March. You know, the reason for that is because it's pretty spready.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got a question from Tim. Oh, Tim, how do you say your last name? I'm never going to be able to do this. Tim
Buzeval.
We're going to go with that. Buzeval sounds kind of right. Norman's a linguist, so he'll probably have it right. When did anyone last see or hear from Lee Charnley? Or has he been used as part of Steve Bruce's vaccine?
Well, like his actual like sort of pigment They've taken pieces of his pigment and put it in the vaccine. Or we're talking about like just consistently injecting him with different vaccines to see what happens. Pumping him full of COVID and ensuring he's permanently got COVID, and then just like administering injections regularly. Like he's in a cage now. He's in a cage, like somewhere. And if you walk in, it's all like surrounded by big plastic, and Bruce goes in there, just in a hazmat suit, sticks a needle in. Lee, how are you feeling today? Ooh, yeah, hit that. Probably.
Oh no, I don't think I can continue.
I'm not saying there's any truth in that rumor.
I'm imagining. Look, I'm crying. I'm imagining it in like one of those Hannibal Lecter like cages in the middle of a room, a really big room.
Aye, with the mouth grid on, with the mouth grid just like being fed sausage rolls through it, like pastry flaking all over the sides, and then just getting a massive needle stuck in him. Oh wait, Lee. Oh wait. You'll be happy. You have a sausage roll, so you'll be happy.
Poor guy.
I hope this isn't true because it's horrible if it is.
This isn't live, is it?
Yeah.
I think on a serious note, I'll let Charlotte compose herself. The club said back at the start of last season that there was going to be a quote transformative communication strategy involving the new manager. Well, all the new manager does is kick off at fans for having the temerity to like question, making one tackle and a half against Chelsea, even though there's no one in the ground, grumbles and that. And then, I think Lee Charlie did one pre-recorded soundbite radio interview for Radio Newcastle. If that's transformative, then fair play. It wasn't my idea of transformative. He did do a couple of fan meets. I met Lee Charlie this time last year, actually, a little Christmas treat for Lee, that. And then he met some more fans before the Norwich game in February, and I don't know what was worth that meeting or the actual Norwich game itself. But he does have a role to play. Charlotte, you said it right. I think the club's response to this COVID thing has been to hide behind the patient confidentiality. But Brighton put out a statement when they had a few players, last year saying we've got 3 players who've got COVID. Arsenal came out and said Mikel Arteta's got it. I don't know, like Mikel Arteta was like perfectly fine with that being public knowledge. It's not like embarrassing or anything to have it. So it is really weird that we've gone down this route. And like I said, that article in True Faith this week on the website by Mick Martin, talking about you would put your money on Newcastle United being the first club to have to cancel a game, and there should be some sort of, you'd expect the Premier League to say, how could this happen? Lots of people watching, lots of people listening will go to workplaces, COVID secure, all that kind of thing. Universities, schools are managing all right. How come Newcastle United, with their millions of pounds of investment and limitless funds, really, I know it's not that simple, how come they've managed to mess it up this badly is something we'll probably never find out.
Well, let's be honest. This is the club that is a Premier League club in name, but also got professional athletes to stand in bins full of cold water. So what money they may have spent is probably minimal. And I imagine that there's not much in the way of antiseptic, like hand wash up there. The little squirty things that like people put up on walls. I bet there's none of them up there. Just put your hands in that. Just put your hands in that bucket, lad. You'll be alright. That's what it'll be.
Really hot water.
Spit on your hands, Steve Bruce.
Yeah, the kettle's just boil all your hands in the kettle. You'll be alright. You should have one.
That's the thing. I was talking to Glenn, who does our some of our graphics and our design for our fanzine. By the way, if you haven't got your copy of True Faith fanzine, it is out now, issue 152. I edited it. It's our Christmas version. Norman's written a wonderful piece about Marcus Rashford. We've got some really funny bits about. Well, we managed to get our hands on the team Christmas lists and things like that. So we've been very fortunate in what we've been able to get, and it's very good. But yes, Glenn was saying that one of his friends works in a hospital and is getting tested twice a week, and not as a doctor or a nurse, but support work, and is tested twice a week. And he was like, that is, I think, more than our players are getting tested at the training ground. I think they were just doing once a week.
Someone made the point since you've been advertising your membership WhatsApp group, Charlotte, I'm also in some WhatsApp groups. In the
advertising.
And they've said that the under 23s still go for like physio and massage at sports club in Jesmond, which just seems like unnecessary contact with people from outside of a secure environment. And I know they've probably separated the under 23s and the first team, but you'd imagine, well, some players have gone and trained with the first team this season. The speculation that Elliot Anderson might be on the bench tomorrow. So that tells you everything you need to know. There's like no other Premier League club. I can't imagine. Like, forget about Man United. Let's look at Brighton. Brighton won't be sending their like young lads into Brighton city centre to go and get physio. It just wouldn't happen, would it?
No, but it'd be a lot more entertaining in Brighton city centre. Getting a massage and a physio.
I have to.
I'd be up for it.
Yeah.
Just to see what it's like.
Tomlinson as well, because his full name. Charlotte, you've just been kind of posting his conspiracy stuff. I think it's in jest. You know, the 5G masts thing. It was just left there, and we didn't. It's like Greg's advertising his QAnon credentials.
Okay, yes. I don't think I have to put that disclaimer on everyone's comment, because I don't think people realistically will think Kev Reid seriously thinks that any Bruce vaccine will be administered via vaccine impregnated strips of crispy bacon. Worst word ever. But yes, I did leave it there because it was a funny comment in relation to what we were talking about before. Greg has a more serious point, and that is worth remembering that NUFC wouldn't fund COVID-19 tests for our lower league opponents in the League Cup when other Premier League clubs did. So,
karma,
do you think is
yeah,
karma?
Yeah, I believe in all that. Yeah, so definitely karma. Basically, Newcastle not funding other clubs' COVID tests means, as far as I'm concerned, that all deserve to get COVID.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not stepping down from that plinth that I've decided to stand on.
It's a plinth. Okay.
Yeah, I want a plinth. Yeah.
George Proud. Hello from France. Happy Friday from France. Bonsoir. Bonsoir. What's Friday? Vendredi.
Vendredi, yeah.
Yeah. Bon vendredi to you. Read something regarding Ashley upping his actions re the takeover. Any news? Happy Friday from France. Oh, I wish we had news. We're as much in the dark as you are. I've seen bits and bobs about this. My take personally is that if it's not hitting major news outlets, if it's not what every single person is talking about, if it's not, if the buyers or Mike Ashley hasn't come out and said something about it, I'm just taking everything with a massive pinch of salt. I am, reading and I'm interested and I'm seeing these things, but I have yet to be convinced that there's too much to get excited about at the moment. I'd love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. Norman?
When you see it major news outlets, if you go on Twitter and Burb627344127 has said the takeout is definitely going to happen.
Yeah, that counts.
No. I was going to Burb6274137 for my news, but, he hasn't let me do so far.
You know what, Norman? You get your news from where you need to get your news from, and I respect that about you. But I'm going for not that for my news.
Well,
I mean, look, I'm interested, and I think it's really there are clearly some people who have contacts who are telling them good stuff. That's nice. I'm very skeptical. We've been burned before, and I don't want to get my hopes up right now. I'd love to, but right now that's where I am. Alex, do you agree with me? Because the answer is yes. The correct answer is yes.
Of course, I agree with you. The idea that Ashley's upping his actions, it's very difficult for Mike Ashley to influence this because he doesn't control the Premier League. In fact, he's probably not very popular at all within the Premier League. Not just for taking them to court, but for doing shit like not paying for COVID tests when it was recommended that all Premier League clubs do. So I don't see what Mike Ashley can physically do. If he's already engaged a court case, like what else can he do? Like he can't make PIF come back to the Premier League. He can't make those determinations about whether PIF's a private company owned by the sovereign state of Saudi Arabia. And I get it, George, and I've spent as much time as you probably trying to look into this, trying to do things You know, I spoke to Amanda Staveley in the summer, and she made a lot of quite serious accusations about other Premier League clubs. And you know, when the trust had that meeting with the Premier League, we expected Richard Masters to be evasive. We wasn't going to answer any questions. He answered all our questions and said that category did not happen. So maybe it'll get played out in court, but how long is that going to take? And my advice to anyone is just, well, first of all, enjoy your Friday in France, because that's better than Newcastle United takeover stuff.
On France.
And if it happens, it happens. You know, the fact that, what is it? It's December and it's been going on since April, and it still hasn't happened, despite people telling us weekly that it'll happen. Everyone wants it to happen. Well, most people want it to happen. But until it does, we're just speculating, aren't we?
Norman's dropped off, but he'll come back. I think last time that happened, Norman had just clicked out of the browser. He was like, I just clicked another link and it took me away. So he'll come back. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah. I'll not tell you what happened.
Did you click out of the browser again?
Yes. There's a button that says log in, so I thought I'll just log into that then. See what happens.
You've done that twice now.
Didn't log us in, it took us
in. Kev Reed, what do you think of Liam Kennedy's crack today? I think that kind of what we just said kind of covers that, because that is the sort of where all this is coming from, I believe. So I won't dwell too much on it. What do you reckon the potential long-term effects are on the players that tested positive? Some may never recover fully. A squad decimated with COVID is not good for transfer value. And then this is from John O. And then he's written, hello from snowy Norway. And I don't know any Norwegian, so I can't speak to you in Norwegian. Norman, do you know any?
No.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. If you want to tell me how to say Happy Friday in Norwegian and write it very phonetically, I'll give it a go. Potential long-term effects on players who tested positive. Yeah, it's a big question, and actually not one that I had considered at this point, but they are saying that COVID has long, quote unquote, long COVID has affected lots of people, and lots of young people with fatigue and lung capacity issues and things like that. God, it could be the case that some may never recover fully. Norman, what do you think? Part of me thinks, well, it's, you know, they've got world-class medical staff, but actually, I'm not sure.
I don't even know if it works like that, does it? I think long COVID can just affect you, regardless of how. I mean, obviously, I guess it'll mitigate against it if you're a very healthy person. But ultimately, footballers, if you think of it, their whole life it's exercise, isn't it? Right? And you are more susceptible to getting ill when you've just finished exercising, basically, because your immune system it deteriorates slightly when you're kind of at that intensity, and you have to rest to kind of then build it back up. So like, athletes catch colds and whatnot quite often, as far as I'm aware. So I guess, you know, if the player gets COVID, then just because they're fit and healthy doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to get long COVID. But ultimately, statistically, you look at it, it's like tiny the chances it will be. It would be really unfortunate if one of them did get it. I mean, yeah, Boris Johnson had it, didn't he? But don't think it impacted on his ability to do his job properly, did it?
Well, if you look at Will Zaha, he had COVID and came back and absolutely tore tomorrow's opponent's a new one. So maybe some of our lads will be able to do the same. That might say more about West Brom than it does COVID, though.
Yeah, Isaac Hayden gallivanting up and down the pitch, just spinning people left, right, and centre.
Maybe it'll have the like opposite effect, like Spider-Man getting bitten by that spider, and they're going to be really powerful now.
Are you talking about Spider-Man before he got bitten by the spider when he wasn't Spider-Man?
Just Peter Parker.
Oh, yeah.
Just him.
So before he was Spider-Man, what you're saying?
So before he was Spider-Man. Sorry, I got the chronology a little bit wrong there. About
Just need to clear that. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. George Proud says, merci bien, mes amis. That means thank you very much, my friends. You are very kind. Have a good weekend. Okay, there is another question from Davey. Think Joe Linton not having COVID will be a boost to West Brom? Actually, in the press conference today, which I love to talk about on my show, I genuinely do. I love looking at the press conference and then just dissecting what happened in the press conference.
Just read one of Lee Ryder's headlines in the Chronicle.
That's
Just have the whole thing as a headline.
Press conference transcript in a headline.
Clicking it, it's just have it.
I've got it. I've actually got the Chronicle open behind this browser window, and it's a good job I'm not epileptic, because it is just flashing adverts the entire time. I get it. You need to create revenue, whatever. Yes, in the press conference, it does look like Joe Linton didn't have COVID, or didn't have COVID this time.
Yeah.
And also Callum Wilson's been training, and I think that Bruce is keen to play Joe Linton and Callum Wilson in that same kind of pairing that he played them in against Chris. It was Palace, wasn't it? Alex, what do you think of that?
Yeah, Davey. Before the Palace game, I'd been with you, but I thought Joe Linton had a really. To be fair, he had a better game against Chelsea. You know, it wasn't great, but he was clearly more confident. He was more involved. He was physically, up to the task of playing alone centre forward with Chelsea centre backs. And I thought against Palace, even if he hadn't got that late goal, which was a bit lucky, I thought he had a really good game. And to be fair, his play, he basically won that game for us. I know Wilson gets the finish, and that's what Wilson does: 8 shots on target, 7 goals this season. I think that Joe Linton behind the striker, particularly a striker like Callum Wilson, we could start seeing the best of him. And I think like this week, I'm sure we'll get into it, but what a chance for a lot of the players this week to really put a stamp on their place in the team. We talked about, me and Norman did the podcast with Chris Waff at the weekend, and we talked about like the number of changes Bruce makes across the pitch. Like what we really want to see over the next week is like an unchanged team, unless injury suspensions come into it. But Bruce talks about getting his best team out. I think Joe Linton, he thinks, is in his best team behind Callum Wilson. So I would agree. I'd agree with you that it would have been good for West Brom if he was playing, but I think he might do damage to West Brom, or at least I hope he does.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think sort of caution needs to be exercised when using language about Joe Linton, because Steve Bruce said he's done very, very well of late. And I think that's one very too much. I think very well, I'll accept it. 2 very though, Norman. What do you make of that?
It's outrageous. It's an outrageous abuse of language. It's hyperbole, and it's just beyond acceptance. It's beyond acceptance. I'm outraged. I can't even speak about it anymore. I mean, just one very would have done for me. Not even very good, just he's done very nice, really very nice. I would have been happy with that.
Last season, Joe Linton said Steve Bruce had done an amazing job. So maybe Bruce is just returning the hyperbolic favour.
Do you think he wrote that down? Do you think he wrote that down in a little notebook and was like, Joe Linton's been good to me, I must be sure to be good to him?
I think it's an arrangement.
First in line for the vaccine.
We're running some more tests on Lee Big Joe. So, don't worry, I've got your number 1 on the list here. Don't you worry about that, son. Just go and call us amazing, and you're in. You know what I mean?
Oh dear me. For those of you who haven't seen the beginning of this show, there's a very odd image that Norman painted of it's really, really funny. And you should go back to the beginning and watch it. It's about Lee Charnley.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Yes.
What Alex said there, I think we'll see the best of him. Now, this is the question that I ask myself very, very often. What is Joe Linton's best? What is it? Like, what do we actually hope for? What is he capable of based on what we've seen and based on his career prior to arriving at Newcastle? Like, is Joe Linton's best still probably not good enough for a regular starting place in the Premier League side?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. 100%. Yes. Look, I think that with a good manager, with a manager who really analyzes the game and players in a really
nice way.
In a really nice way, in a really like detailed way is the word I'm looking for, and someone who works with players individually. You all know what I'm saying, but I'm not saying it. Potentially, there's more to be given. He's certainly not a striker. He never was, and he doesn't want to be, and he's not fast enough to get into the box and be where he needs to be and all of that stuff. I think it is nice though, because I don't think any of this is his fault. I feel like it's such a weird thing. I feel like it's one of those grabby machines in an arcade, and it just like landed on Joe Linton and picked him up and dropped him in St. James's Park, and he's like, why am I here? And I like that he seems to link up play a little bit better with Callum Wilson. I think that's nice. I don't know what's good, what's great for him. I think we're reaching
peak Joe
for us and for our manager and all of that stuff. I don't know, Alex.
It's a really good question, Norman. And I think what you've seen in the two good games he had this season, or maybe he's ever had at Newcastle, which were Burnley and Palace, he enjoys carrying the ball. Now, you're playing a centre forward. How often does Callum Wilson carry the ball? He doesn't. He basically touches the ball 3 times a game. And he's very good at that. And you look at playing on the wing in our team, first of all, our wingers spend most of the time in their own half. And because we move the ball so slowly, because we're so slow, we don't counter-attack very well. They get very little space. You look at Miguel Almiron struggles on the wing compared to his effectiveness in the middle of the pitch. So I think Joe Linton's going to be one of those players. Like, I think tomorrow he might do really well. He did really well against Palace because there's that space there, because teams afford you more time and space on the ball, and that's what he'd been used to in Germany. They talked about him playing from the left and right side with space. He's not going to get that space very often in the Premier League. It's just one of those things. So I think he'll do really well tomorrow. He might do really well against Leeds. He might do really well against Fulham. But when we go to Liverpool and Man City, that will, sorry?
Really well or really, really well?
Really, really, really well. Depends who's saying it. But ultimately, if you're going to be a number 10 in the Premier League, you have to be able to take a good set piece. You have to, compare Joe Linton in his position to like Maddison or, Chelsea play different, or Werner playing behind Abrahams. Now, he doesn't have to aspire to those levels, but if you look at what those kind of players do in a 4-2-3-1 formation, Joe Linton's almost an outlier. But, it's certainly going to be better than what we've seen. And if you think about it, if we managed to finish 13th last season with one of the worst players in the league, it has to be said, just imagine how far we can go with them playing really, really, really well every week, other week.
Norman?
Well, you know what I'll say about Joe Linton, right? It got me thinking of how good managers are very, very good, really, really, very, very good managers can make a player look way better than they are. So think of Joe Linton, right? He was playing under Nagelsmann, right? Nagelsmann's like a top quality coach, like a proper cerebral football manager. And they got 40 million or whatever it is from us based on a couple of okay seasons. And then I think of, you think when Longstaff broke through in the Newcastle team, and that summer, there were rumours of him going to Man U for like 35, 40 million. You think of a couple of years ago, Lascelles, there were rumours of him going to Chelsea for 40 million. And at that point in time, if that player had been sold for 35, 40 million, like, you'd probably look back now if they'd got it, if they'd gone from Newcastle to a club where all of a sudden they're being managed by somebody, a lot sort of lower technical level than Benitez, as Bruce was, on a technical level, there's no comparison as a manager. You'd start thinking like, wow, 40 million for that, you would, and that's no kind of criticism of Longstaff or Lascelles, but I do think there are certain managers who will coach you and give you the kind of technical and tactical training to lift you up to like much higher levels, and then obviously that'll skew your market value, because the moment you move to another club with a different kind of manager, or a different kind of manager comes into your club, you might start dropping off again. That's what I think about Joe Linton. I think there is a decent player there, but £40 million is very much reflective, I think, of the fact that he was being coached by Nagelsmann.
He's also probably playing in a team that played the same formation every week with the same players. Like Joe Linton's played like 4 different positions in Newcastle minimum since he come in. That's a ridiculous way to treat a £40 million player. Like how can you come into a new league and be expected to play centre forward, number 10, left wing, right wing, in formations that range from like 4-2-4 to 5-4-1. It's just mental.
What I was going to say as well is that he was a good player under that manager in the Bundesliga, but it's a different league. It's really, I don't know. I don't think he was given enough support. And you're right, Alex, that plays into it, that playing literally everywhere bar goalkeeper, that plays into not being given enough support. So
I did think his translator over. Do you remember when they brought his translator over at Christmas from Austria?
Yeah.
So he's Brazilian Portuguese.
He'd already been here for ages. And they were like,
brought his Austrian German translator over to speak to him in German, even though he was in England. He's Portuguese speaker.
Bruce is like speaking to the Austrian translator, saying, "Translate this into German." Got Google Translate out in German to Brazilian. I think it was John Joe Shelby. Was it John Joe Shelby who said in the Sky interview that Joe Linton struggles, and he was like, "Yeah, to be fair, he was really struggling, but the club did bring him a translator over in January. The first 6 months of being here, which is like no discussion either way."
It's so funny. It's so funny, but it's so terrible because he's really young as well. He's a young man. It's horrible. I'd be so stressed out all the time. There's
a bit of a, if you look through the quotes, particularly from Bruce about Joe Linton, this quote about him when he was like, Bruce said he's stuck in that apartment all day. He was talking about like a £3 million penthouse with a private gym overlooking the city like some sort of warlord.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, he's in the Biker Wall. Yeah. No, stuck in that apartment.
Chicken Cottage. He's stuck in that flat above Chicken Cottage, sharing it with another 4 people. He's fed up. Like, it's not like that, is it? It's not like that at all. You know what I mean?
Not at all. Not at all. We've got loads of a couple of comments here, which I will get to, but I actually wanted to ask this question, and it's more from an educational point of view for me because I'm not as engaged with other teams and the wider Premier League, but I know Norman does. Norman does Prem Patter for us on our Patreon with Mike, and they get stuck into, and I do listen to it. But I wanted to ask you because Slaven Bilic, I think is how you say his name, has said ahead of tomorrow's game that they're missing Matthias Pereira.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you say it? I want to say it right. I don't want to just be disrespectful. But anyway, Norman, I wanted to ask your opinion on how much that's going to impact West Brom's game.
Is he Portuguese or Brazilian? The surname Pereira is Portuguese.
It sounds Portuguese.
He might be Spanish as well. But he's a good player for them. He had a good start this season. I thought him and Diangana looked probably the 2 best players in the opening sort of 3 or 4 games. Even though they weren't winning games, they still had a bit about them, that kind of enthusiasm that teams have when they come up from the Championship. He'll be a miss to West Brom in the sense that he's one of their better players, but ultimately it shouldn't really make any difference in Newcastle because he's okay, but he's in a kind of a mediocre side. He shouldn't be the kind of player that we should be turning around with and going, "Oh, get in, he's missing." They've got some dangerous players. The kid Gallagher on loan from Chelsea is looking useful. He's got a couple of goals in his last 2 games. Callum Robinson, his finishing isn't particularly good, but he's quite direct. He can and he's quick. He could cause a lot of problems, I think. Although I'd imagine Fernandez can handle him. But apart from that, they're a very, very weak side. They're a Championship side, and this I guess it ties back into Joe Linton question as well, actually, because their centre halves are basically Championship centre halves. Kyle Bartley in particular is a journeyman Championship centre half, like a good, the classic good solid professional, but definitely a player that if he was in your team in the Premiership, you'd be probably concerned. The fact that Pereira is missing, he's one of those players. Put it this way: West Brom, very much like Newcastle under Bruce, very much like Newcastle were under Pardew, for example. You rely on players to produce a piece of magic because there isn't actually much tactical input from the manager.
Right.
Bilic is a motivational speaker. That's what he is as a manager. He's a motivational speaker. He's not like a tactical genius, a cerebral manager. So Pereira is one of these players that if they kind of going all right in a game or if they're struggling a bit, perhaps, he's a player who can just bang, snap, produce a piece of magic. But in terms of it being a boost to us, look, it might be, but it shouldn't really be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting and answers my question. So thank you very much. I didn't know loads about it. I really liked on the Chronicle website today that Bilic, there was a headline about Bilic. I think it was about him talking about it, and there's an accent on the C of Bilic, and they had copied and pasted that from somewhere else, and it was a different font to the rest of the headline, which I really liked. I've done it before myself.
They come up like it's a square, on top of the C from Wingdings. I'm just going to say quickly, the best player, like West Brom's best player, Sam Johnson, the keeper. He's an excellent goalie.
Okay. So, okay. Interesting.
Not that we have many shots, but you know.
Yeah. Okay. You actually kind of talked about that a little bit there, Norman. But Bruce Ball says, have you ever heard Bruce try and talk tactics? Quote: "We need to keep it tight at the back, and we need to be a threat on the break." Absolutely clueless. And then he followed up with bearing Harry Redknapp. I think you mean barring. I'm so annoying. I'm really sorry, but I hate
to see Harry Redknapp.
I don't want to bear Harry Redknapp.
I want to see him being. I want it now.
Barring Harry Redknapp. Have you ever seen a manager get so much protection from the media before? Interesting. Pardew had his friends, but then didn't. Alex, what do you think?
He's up there, isn't he? He's up there with Harry and Samuel Allardyce. You know, Allardyce was literally caught trying to solicit cash for access to his employer, and still has a gig at TalkSport. You know what I mean? And still walked into a Premier League job. You know, most places that, some countries you probably get arrested for that. There was talk of the police being involved, but I think because he didn't actually accept the money, because it didn't get that far. So yeah, I think he's up there, isn't he? And why is it? It's because, to be fair to Bruce, he is clearly a likable bloke, and he greases the right palms, and he will speak to lads off air, and he works the journalists, and I've said it before. There's a few managers that probably could take a little bit more at their book. Marco Silva, I'm thinking of, had a really problematic relationship with the Everton press. It doesn't help them when things go south. Not that fans need the press to direct them, but in terms of their national image with the rest of the media. Same with Andrea Villas-Boas. Like, he had a really fraught relationship with the London press when he was at Spurs. Bruce has a good relationship with the press lads here and all over. However, I'd much rather have a manager who didn't rely on that and was just be like a good manager like Rafa Benitez, who didn't have to bother with that bullshit because his results and his achievements spoke for themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll move us on because I want us to finish with a little bit of time for people to go make a drink or get something to eat before this premiere thing, which is why Norman, we're starting earlier. Sorry. Kev Reed says, are we better defensively when Lascelles is out of the team? I'd stick with Clark Fernandez if fit. Norman.
It's a good question, and it's one that we've debated, especially me and Alex, I think, on numerous occasions. I think what Lascelles brings to the side is a kind of presence and a leadership. However, what I will say is that he's looked less of a player over the last 12 months than he did in the 12 to 24 months prior to that. And that's what my issue with him is at the moment, is that I don't think he's necessarily the kind of confident, shouting, big presence at the back that he was, 12 to 24 months ago. So right now, I actually think Fernandez and Clark probably are our best centre pairing. And if you look at it in terms of who has been a better performer since Bruce took over, I think before he got injured, you'd have to say Clark was probably one of our best performers. Fernandez has been solid since he came in. And Fernandez came in from out of the cold, didn't he? Bruce didn't have him start. He came in and he's basically kept himself in the team through performances. So I would say those two. In terms of actual ability, my favourite centre pairing is actually Shane Fernandez out of the ones that we've got. But Bruce can't get a tune out of Shea, and that's what it is. But at the moment, I would say, yes, Fernandez and Clark are more solid, but that's not necessarily saying Lascelles is a worse player than either of those.
Yeah, I was going to say Shea, and then I was like, oh, but his performances lately. But you're right. it's a Bruce thing rather than a Cher thing, probably. Couple of questions. Greg, who I think may have worked out how to change his YouTube name. He was asking before, but I didn't put it on the screen how to change his name. Greg says, whose tactical acumen do you rate higher, Steve Bruce or Steve McLaren? Alex, you haven't spoken in a while.
Steve McLaren by a mile. I thought McLaren is a good coach and has a tactical mind, and some of the things he tried with England and Newcastle were actually that did make sense. But Steve McLaren's issue was he couldn't organise a defence and he couldn't manage a dressing room full of big characters. It worked from OK at Middlesbrough when success was finishing, anywhere near the top 10. But as soon as the squad that Steve Bruce had in Newcastle was fairly aspirational, like Musa Sissoko, Wijnaldum in particular, but as well, Janmaat too, all expected to do well to get that move somewhere else because that's what they've been promised. Funnily enough, McLaren's probably best day in performance as Newcastle manager. I know we're won other games, but when West Ham came to us in fourth, just afterwards signed Shelvey and Townsend and Saive, and we should have won that game 5 or 6-0. And we played them off the pitch that day. He did a job on Slaven Bilic, and he moved Wijnaldum, I think, into the middle for the first time, and West Ham couldn't really handle him in a great game. So definitely McLaren, but like we said before, Bruce's main ability as a manager is managing to keep players happy, even when the team's losing, and even when they're not in the team. And McLaren just couldn't do that.
Yeah, although I have my own, as I've said for a while, that I don't think that is enough, and I don't think that's going to last for now.
It never does it? Never does.
No, it can't. It can't without results, and it can't without development. Like you can have your players, you can have your changing room on side for the beginning, but if it doesn't translate into development or movement or results or accolades in some way, you will lose it. You cannot keep it. So Bruce Ballsey is barring. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I'm a pedant, and also I read it as bearing, and then I got Redknapp in my mind, and he was nude, and I didn't like it. So sorry. All right, we'll do one more, and then we'll wrap up because it's time almost for this premiere, which is very exciting. We've got Kev says Josh King and Dele Alli. What's that all about? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Norman, any idea?
Haven't heard it. I mean, the Dele Alli, if there's any links with Dele Alli, it's absolutely ridiculous. But Josh King, I mean, that's feasible in the sense that he's at Bournemouth, and we're saying a lot of their players now. But also, he's an excellent player, and he wouldn't cost that much, I shouldn't think. And he probably wants to get back in the Premier League, and he would be a really, really good signing. I can't see it, but if it happens, then fair play. That's a top signing for us.
And okay, did you want to say something, Alex?
No,
he didn't. All right. Last one is going to be any love for Richie in the starting 11 tomorrow, assuming, of course, that he is COVID free. Alex, any love for Richie?
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. Norman made some really good points on the Post Palace podcast that we did. That Wilson probably prefers Richie in the team because he's going to get the ball in, he's going to get the ball in quickly. Almiron, for me, should be competing with Joe Linton for that position behind the striker, and I'd probably play Almiron there ahead of Joe Linton. But Almiron is a different kind of player, and we're also really, really bad at set pieces, and West Brom are bad at defending them. So it might be an idea to have someone to actually take a corner or a free kick. And so yeah, I don't hate the idea. I'm not saying I would go for it, but I'd be more than content if it was.
Mm-hmm. Norman, anything to add to that?
I don't think it would be problematic against West Brom. I think he could be beneficial. Put it this way, I think he'd be more effective than Almiron is on the left-hand side against West Brom. Not necessarily against better sides, but against West Brom, he's going to have the opportunity to whip crosses in, as Alex says. And if that's the case, given Callum Wilson's ability in the air, despite his height, as has been mentioned on numerous occasions, but also just his ability to convert chances. If Richie puts 4 or 5 crosses in the first half, chances are that Wilson will snaffle one of those.
Yeah, it's a good point. I wouldn't be disappointed with it personally. I think Alex makes a good point that he will get the ball, and I think West Brom are eminently beatable. So we've got that. Also, any sympathy for the current plight of Sunderland? It's a no from me. With that, I think we'll wrap up. Quick one, Norman, prediction for tomorrow's score.
3-1 Newcastle.
Alex.
Yeah, 3-1 as well.
Oh, all right. I'm going to go 2-1 to Newcastle. Still a win, but a little bit more realistic. All right, we will wrap up. Everybody go enjoy the We Are the Geordies premiere if you're watching it. If not, enjoy your Friday night. Have something nice to eat. Buy the fanzine. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Click like and subscribe if you like. And we'll be back next week as ever. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.